All right, this is fine. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry for last week. I could not make it. I'm traveling. I'm not in Oman this week, and maybe next week as well. So I'm staying in a hotel now. It's not. This is my house, not my house, not my office. This is why, I have to fix things on my laptop and my mobile phone, which is fine now. I see the number is. I have a good number this week, I think 35, 40. But anyway, the Yemeni conflict, which was to be last week, this would take more than half of this seminar. And then the second half or less will be talking about Oman as a mediator for the Yemeni conflict or the possible mediation by Oman. So Yemeni conflict has been there for a long time. It's not only 2015, but then it was before 2015. Since 2011, if you look back what happens in the Middle East, you will find that Yemen was one of the countries having the what is called political transformations in the Middle East, or Arab Spring. That was began in 2011. As you can see that 2011 was the beginning. So what was happening in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Syria, the same thing in Yemen. People went out in the street calling for reform. They want to have a better life. Yemen is one of the best locations and a rich country by its people and its culture and its location. But what happened exactly that people wanted to improve the conditions because they did not have enough necessities. They could not have enough basic necessities to be able to survive a decent life. So likewise, what happened in many countries in the Middle East at that time in 2011, people went out on the street asking for reform and calling for the fall down, trying to bring down the government of um, Ali Abdullah Saleh. Now, that situation went on from 2011 to 2012. Until 2012, Ali Abdullah Saleh conceded somehow. He abdicated the presidency, which was under his power, and he gave it to Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi. He was already working with him in the government, but that seems to be a step towards satisfying the needs of the people, satisfying the requests of the community in Yemen who ask for reform, who ask for having a better life conditions. So there was a move. It looks like that move would somehow help the Yemeni people to be able to stand the situation, to be able to live a good life, but it was not. It was not. What happened at that time, later on, the situation continues deteriorating in Yemen, where we have in Yemen is kind of majority Sunni. Almost 75% of the Yemenis are Sunni. At the same time, we have about 25 are Shia who used to live somehow side by side and having kind of coexistence until that situation in 2012. That kind of some changes happened. We have the Ali Abdullah Saleh. After conceding, he wanted to come back. He wanted to stay in power. I mean, the man who served in the country for many years, for a few decades, almost 25, 30 years in power, he did not want to leave. Same like was in, what happened in Tunisia, Zain al-Abidin bin Ali, and Egypt, Hosni Mubarak. They wanted to stay there. Same with Bashar al-Assad. They wanted to stay. They wanted to keep the power for the rest of their life. So Ali Abdullah Saleh wanted to turn against the revolution and against the people demands in Yemen. What he did, a move which was somehow unexpected. He went in a coalition with the Houthis. Usually that Ali Abdullah Saleh was working with many governments in the region, such as Saudi Arabia, and he was in support of the Saudi Arabia uh, regime. But then his move was to come back to power, to stay in power for a long time against the revolution in Yemen. He somehow was working with the Houthis and giving them the logistics, the weapons to fight with him against what is called the revolutionary people at that time who wanted to live and have a good life in Yemen. This kind of coalition with the Houthis collapsed. It collapsed, and we're going to talk about this more in details, where Ali Abdullah Saleh was killed almost by Houthis themselves. But then what happened? The Houthis took over the capital city of Yemen, Sana'a. So that led the Saudis and Emiratis to lead what is called the decisive storm. Asifat al-Hazm. It's a military operation in Yemen. They wanted to get rid of the Houthis because taking over the capital of Yemen, that will constitute a threat for the Saudis, as Yemen is next door to them. This is not the end of the situation. This is only the beginning of the whole situation. In 2014, the Houthis took over Sana'a, the capital. And in 2015, the coalition forces led by Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries went in a war in Yemen against the Houthis. Of course, the Houthis were supported by Iran, logistically, financially, politically. They support them to stand and fight back. And this is the situation today. Today it's 2020, and the fight is still there. The Houthis are fighting. They have the power in the capital. They're still there. And the Saudis have been fighting for the past 5 years, and they could not have any kind of influence on that situation. What we have is devastation. We do have destruction, millions of refugees, and the country on the verge of collapse, if it's not already have collapsed. Let's have a look at the location of Yemen. You can see in this slide here, slide number 3, this is location of Yemen. And this is the area where the Houthis have full control, the capital city and surrounding areas. But I'm not looking at this situation now. I'm looking at the line of transportations. You can see the line of transportation. This line goes in the Gulf of Aden, to the Red Sea, to the Mediterranean, to Europe. So the line of shipment traffic, it comes from Asia and the Pacific, goes to the Middle East and Europe. Everything goes through what is called Bab al-Mandab. It's the Strait of Bab al-Mandab, which is one of the most sensitive and important straits in the world. Most of the commodities coming to the Middle East and Europe from Asia and the Pacific go through Bab al-Mandab Strait, where Oman overlook this strait. So it's kind of a strategic locations. Yemen is one of the best locations in the Middle East. Now, in this slide, looking at the slide 4, I look at the control where we have, I'm not sure of how much you can see of this because it's a small size, the map. You see the control of the Houthis, mostly in the capital city and surrounding areas. We have the blue, we have Al-Qaeda, which is ISIS, was located in Yemen, and I think it's still functioning somehow. The Hadi government, Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi, it's in the middle, controlling almost half or maybe more than half of the country. The white color is this what is called like areas, sparsely population areas, meaning like we have only small number of population in these areas living, but most of the density populated areas are ruled either by Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi forces and the coalition. And on the other side, you're going to find in the yellow color, you'll find the Houthis have taken over the most important areas, especially the capital. So the fight is still there. We look at the Saudi Arabia and UAE. Why they fight the fight? What they want exactly? Why the Saudis led such coalition in Yemen? What they wanted from Yemen? It's not an easy for anybody to understand somehow why the intervention by Saudis and Emiratis in Yemen, away from the whole conflict between the Saudis and Iranians in the Gulf. You have the Gulf has been divided between Gulf area, the influence being divided between the Saudis and Iranians. So each one of them would like to have some kind of influence ones. Once you have the Houthis have taken over and control the capital city of Yemen, which is one of the biggest Arab countries, almost 30 million people living in Yemen, the Yemeni people. So that will constitute a threat to the Saudis. So that would be Iran from both sides surrounding Saudi Arabia, and this would have an influence. Security and insecurity issues would be there, where the Saudis would think really carefully how to deal with the situation. So one of the main, if it's not the main reason initially, the Saudis went into the war in Yemen because the Iranians supporting the Houthis in Yemen by all kind of means of military equipment. And we're going to see later on what happened in 2018, 2019, and 2020, and how the Houthis were able to launch missiles, long-range missiles against Saudi cities. The situation is still there. The conflict is still, we have escalations. Since 2015, after the Houthis took control of the capital city and they expelled the legitimate government, that time we have the coalition forces led by the Saudi Arabia having to fight the fight. Now, there was an estimation or assessment at the beginning, thinking maybe the Saudis will be able to end this war in a few months' time. But that was not the situation. But the question is, like later on, why this war goes on? What happened exactly? You'll find as well, if you look here, that in 2019, which is last year, United Arab Emirates have left the fight. They did not stay, even though the UAE were aligned with the Saudis in this fight and they have some ambition, they would like to stay there. But they did not withdraw completely. They limited their forces from 7,000 troops to a few hundred still fighting in Yemen. They lost hope somehow. This kind of conflict, it's not easy for anybody to have a decisive result. It's not a win-lose. It's not a win-lose. I think the Yemeni conflict is a lose conflict. No one would win. The Saudis have lost billions and lost soldiers and lost reputation. Yemenis have lost tens of thousands of its own civilians, destruction of whole cities and millions of refugees, poverty and humanitarian situation. So that situation is not really giving anybody the upper hand. No one is winning this war. At the same time, well, somebody would ask, like, why they don't go for peace? Peace, in fact, is not an easy choice. Why? We're going to talk about this in the discussion if you like, but peace is not an easy choice for both sides. This is for the Iranians and for the Saudis. Somehow, Iranians are fighting there as in a proxy war. So the Houthis are fighting on behalf somehow. At the same time, somebody would tell me, well, this is not the fact the Houthis are fighting for their own sake and they would like to have a better situation and they would like to have control of some areas. This could be, yes, the situation somehow, slightly, but we have what's behind the Houthis. We know, everybody knows what's behind the Houthis and who support them and what they want exactly to have. But again, like, if they would like to end this war, it's not going to be an easy choice without conceding. They have to concede. Same thing for the Saudis, they have to concede, and this is not going to be the situation easy. What happened with this war? We have a disaster. The consequences, it's kind of irreversible. Can we go back to 5 years ago? No. We had somebody, I'm sure that you have maybe one or two you participating in this seminar from Yemen. I think you have a young lady with us, at least from Yemen, and she knows well, better than any one of us. She knows the disaster what Yemeni people have been living in for the past 5 or maybe more than 5 years. You look at the humanitarian crisis, look at the numbers, for example. The estimated death range from 10,000 to 70,000. That could be, this is the official number of the United Nations. Maybe the real number could be more than 100,000 people were killed in this conflict. This is a huge number. This is almost every family have lost somebody, almost. And most of those people, 80% could be more civilians, not soldiers, civilians. And these numbers we have now, according to United Nations reports. Maybe the real number could be even more. How many battles we have? Like almost or more than even 30 battle of fronts in many cities, in many locations. We do have more than 3.5 million people become displaced. You know what? This place is going to be difficult for somebody leaving home, leaving your city. You cannot stay in your place for long. You cannot stay anymore in your house. I mean, imagine when you move from some city to another, from your house to a different city traveling, you will feel the pain. What about somebody who lost their life and they lost their families and they lost their house for good? That is kind of devastation. 80% of the population, look at this number. 80% of the population need assistance. This could be humanitarian assistance, including 10 million. What is 10 million? Almost like 35%. 10 million people now dependent on food aid from different humanitarian organizations. So we have an economic disaster, poverty, in addition to diseases, cholera, for example, one of them. That situation goes on and on. 2019, we had some kind of dramatic changes. 2019, we have more escalation. The Houthis were able to launch missiles against Saudi Arabia. We become most likely, I mean, we don't have a specific evidence, but the Saudis, they could say and they justify, they said those missiles came from Iran, were giving to the Houthis. A long-range missile, the Houthis cannot manufacture. It's not something easy. They can go hundreds of kilometers. They hit the capital city, Riyadh, and they hit different locations on different cities in Saudi Arabia. Um, Now, I'm not going to go back to the minorities and majorities. We know the fact that Yemen is majority is Sunni and minority is Shia. But is this the situation? Do you really think? I mean, this is a big question. We have many analysts and many scholars thinking and writing about the Yemeni conflict. And I'm going to keep this as well for discussion. Is the Yemeni conflict about Sunni Shia? Or is it about military or power control? So this is the big question. You would like, we can talk about this in the discussion more. But then you could see that could be a most likely combination. You could see it in my point of view. One of the points could be, one of the main reasons could be even the sectarian, which is the Sunni Shi'i differences. But then again, it's not about the Yemeni people. It's about the outside. It's the outside influence, the Saudis and the Iranians fighting in Yemen, causing the life of tens of thousands of the Yemeni civilians. So this is what we call in political science a proxy war, meaning fighting on behalf of somebody else. The Saudis have been fighting themselves, but they have the government of Hadi Mansour fighting as well with them, with some coalition partners. Same thing, Houthis on the other side, fighting and getting the support from Iran. Who paid the price? The Yemeni people have paid most of it. What the Saudis think of this conflict? Why they think it was a necessity? They have to go into this conflict in 2015. The Saudis thought well about the situation, thinking that Yemen is a strategic location. Yemen is a next door country. Yemeni government was working with the Saudi government for a long time, for many decades. They have good partnerships. Many Saudis came from Yemen. Even Yemen is the richest country, but without the conflict. Yemeni people are the origin of most of people in the Gulf. Many families in the Gulf countries came from Yemen. Yemen is one of the oldest countries in the world. So we have good partnership between Saudi Arabia and Yemen for a long, long time. Now suddenly when you have the Houthis, who are supported by Iran, having the control of the capital city, I'm not justifying the action of the Saudis at all, But what I'm saying, this was the cause, the reason, the justification made by the Saudi Arabia that it happens was a coup d'etat. What happens in Sana'a was a coup d'etat by the Houthis, or minority militia fighters, um, turning against the official legitimate government of Sana'a. By the way, no one knows exactly what is the number of the Houthis of fighting, but the estimated number, they have at least 100,000 fighters in Yemen, Houthis, at least 100,000 fighters in Yemen. We have in 2015, soon after the Houthis took over in September 2014, took over the capital city. And then later on in 2015, we have the Saudi Minister of Defense, who became later the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, formed a military coalition with many countries in the Middle East, mostly as well Gulf countries, to fight the fight against the Houthis. But some of them already have gone away and left this fight, believing they cannot achieve anything. Now, the fight has been there for the past 5 years, more than 5 years. But then, do we have peace talks? Yes. We had many times peace talks, or at least we have attempts for peace by the Omanis, by United Nations. We have Geneva talks. All have failed. We will look at this now after a few minutes. We'll see how Omanis could always be one of the best mediators for this conflict. No peace talk have made any sense because of the complication of the situation. I would see the complication comes from outside, most likely not from the Yemeni side. I believe now Saudis want to end this conflict by all means because they have lost. For the past year, I think the Saudis have offered, I think at the beginning of this year and last year, they offered to have a peace talk because they cannot stand this war. They lost billions and billions of dollars, and their city is under attack from the Houthis. But then all attempts have failed because of the complications. We have outside power in Yemen, Saudis, of course, Iranians at the same time, United Arab Emirates. Who's else? You look at the United States, look at the Russian. They would like to have influence. They want to have influence in Yemen because of the location and the importance of Yemen. Not even this. Look at the Israelis. After we have normalization deals between Israel and United Arab Emirates, there was some kind of speculations about the possibility that the Israelis have or could have military base in Yemen in cooperation with the United Arab Emirates. Now, some of the weapons that the Saudis were using in this fight, it came from United Kingdom. UK, one of the UK court made a judgment saying, well, this kind of action by the Saudis in Yemen is illegal because they're using the British weapons, and these kind of activities are illegal, and even selling the weapons to Yemenis, selling the weapons to the Saudis by the British is illegal by all means. But this does not influence anything in the war. The war is still there. The conflict is still. So we have some kind of a human rights activist from United Kingdom. They went to court and they were able to get and succeeded in having the decision to be made by the court that the weapons selling weapons to the Saudi Arabia by Britain is illegal. What happened in 2019, as I mentioned before, that United Arab Emirates reduces its forces from almost 7,000 soldiers to a few hundreds, but the war is still there. Now, this is a question about and concern about the Saudi weapons, but the same thing, if you question the Houthis, where they come, the weapons, where does it come from? I mean, not much talk has been done about the Houthis weapons, but there was some kind of allegations, and United States and the Saudis trying to figure out things, but mostly now having a statement coming from Saudi Arabia, sometimes from the United States, saying and stating that these weapons most likely came from Iran. But the fight is still there, and the Houthis is still in the capital city. And two things when you talk about the withdrawal from UAE, from Yemen, mainly, I'm not talking about completely. They believe in two things. One, um, that this war is costing money and costing life and costing reputation, and no one can succeed eventually. But the Emiratis would like to do it in a different way now, a different way, because they believe that the Bab al-Mandab, the Strait of Bab al-Mandab, it's one of the most important things, and we have to have a control on Al-Hudaydah city. And Al-Hudaydah city is very strategic location on the Red Sea. The United Arab Emirates believe as well they have done their best in order to stop the influence of Houthis in the whole Yemen, and they did their best that to minimize the influence of the Al Qaeda in Yemen. But anyway, if you look at the situation many times, you will find that no one has done much, no achievements. Everybody has lost. The Saudis have lost. The Yemenis have lost. The Emiratis have lost. But again, like this conflict, even with this kind of huge loss and harmful have been caused by this war, still going on, still there. We have one of the statements made by UK said the war has achieved little benefit to Saudis, and strategically you can see that Riyadh is in a weaker position than it was in 2015. That is the situation. Saudi Arabia now in a weaker situation, in a difficult situation. So I think it could be time now for peace. But again, who's going to make the peace and how is it going to be made? United Nations have failed. The Omanis have failed. And everybody, almost everybody have failed because of the complications. But almost everybody in the region is fed up and want to have some kind of resolution to be imposed by the United Nations, for example. And I believe that United States can make it easily. If Joe Biden comes to power, Joe Biden might be able to impose such solution. United States can make it if they want. If they wish to do so, United States can impose kind of solutions and can ask the Saudis, because the US and the Saudis are allies and friends. They can impose any kind of solution. At the same time, the United States can maybe talk about more sanctions on Iran to be able to stop this kind of weapons smuggling to Yemen. There's one thing I think what happens in recently with the Houthis escalating more the Yemeni in Yemen, escalating more in the conflict, believing maybe this could be one of the bargaining chip. You know what would happen? Maybe the United States would negotiate with Iran a nuclear deal. That could be the situation. United States and Iran can negotiate a nuclear deal in 2021, taking into consideration the ceasefire and an end to the conflict in Yemen. So the Iranians can control the Houthis, and the Saudis can control their own allies. That could be the situation. This could be the situation, but they need a mediator, and this mediator could be Oman. In addition, of course, to some partners such as Kuwait and United Nations. I'm finished with this. This was supposed to be last week and this week. I would like to move to the second short lecture for the next 5 to 10 minutes only. Then we can have to open the floor for discussion. Now, finish with the conflict. I'm going to be talking about the mediation of Oman and the possibility of Oman becoming a mediator of this conflict. Uh, okay, this is the situation with Oman. This is the second part of this lecture, which is the smallest part. For the next 5 to 10 minutes only, then we can have discussion. Oman as a mediator, Oman role as a mediator in the conflict of Yemen. Oman has been mediating in many conflicts for the past few years. Oman is being neutral and has not interfered in any conflict in the Middle East for the past many decades. It all depends on the Omani wisdom of dealing with the situation and believing that conflict can bring only devastation, that conflict cannot bring any peace. So the Omanis somehow are quiet people. Omanis are really quiet people. I lived in Oman for more than 5 years, and I know how they think and what they believe in. Very quiet people. They don't like to interfere in any conflict. They don't like to take side in any conflict. They always being neutral and objective in all conflicts, even with the conflict in Libya, in Syria. Even they hosted some talks by the Syrian opposition and the Syrian government, separately, of course. That was in Muscat. The host talks between officials from Libya. Same thing with Yemen, but they could not achieve much. But there's one of the main striking achievements for Oman has been in 2015. 2015, Oman was able to mediate between United States and Iran, and that was we had the nuclear deal between Iran and 5+1 in 2015. So Oman was able to host some of the talks. Oman was able to facilitate. Some people call it mediation, but I believe what happened was only facilitation because I think Oman did not do that much. But I mean, yeah, like some of the communication between Iranians and United States was through Omani officials, especially the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf bin Alawi at that time, and the Sultan Qaboos. So this is what I call a neutrality. In neutrality, where Oman has been neutral when we talk about Yemen, the Yemeni conflict. Oman has been really neutral, did not interfere in the war. In 2015, when the coalition forces led by Saudi Arabia went into a war in Yemen, Oman is the only country in the Gulf refused to be engaged in this conflict. They said no. We would like to keep the same distance. Oman said no, we cannot fight in Yemen. Why should we fight? The fight would cause life and destruction. I think this was a wise move, and they believe in peace and believe in the ability to negotiate and talk to everybody and to include everybody in peace dialogue. So Oman kept kind of a distance, almost the same distance between the Saudis and the Iranians, between the Saudis and the Houthis. Even though we have, like before, we have the United Nations tried to mediate between the Saudis and between the opposition Houthis and the Yemeni government, but did not succeed. But they tried to talk to the Omanis to be able to facilitate some of the talks. Oman succeeded in many attempts in terms of releasing hostages, American hostages in Yemen. They were released based on negotiations and mediation by the Omanis. So the 5 years of violence did not make it easy for anybody to come to a peace term. None of the attempts succeeded. Even last year, there were some attempts by United Nations. They did not succeed. Nothing almost happened in terms of peace in this regard. United Nations have been trying to give support, humanitarian support to the people of Yemen, but this does not relieve the people. The people are fed up. They had enough devastations and killing and bloodshed. Conflict goes for the past immensely for the past 5 years, and even before that, we had the conflict almost from 2011. One of the things happened and made Oman more a credible mediator in this conflict, with some of the Yemeni wounded people were tried in Omani hospital, were treated in Omani hospital. Some of the Yemeni wounded from the Houthis, that what is stated by some I'm not really sure about this because there's some of the statement, one of the analysts called Hosni Abadi, who stated that some of the Houthi wounded people, I'm not sure if people or fighters, I'm not really sure about this. I cannot confirm it myself. They were treated in Oman, right? Not even this, many people from Yemen came to Oman to live. Many people came for medical treatments. There was a special issue with some of the tribe living in close by to Omani boundaries because you know that Omani boundaries with Yemen more than 300 kilometers. Some of the families are half Omanis and half of them Yemenis. We have some tribes split between Yemen and Oman. 2 years ago, Sultan Qaboos granted some families in Yemen the nationality. Was based on political ground. So we have like kind of strong ties between Oman and Yemen. We have some kind of long relationship between Oman and Iran. Same thing when you talk about Oman and Saudi Arabia, GCC members, friendship, neighbors. So what happened with Oman in that situation? They wanted to keep the distance with everybody. They wanted to keep the distance. They kept this distance for the past many years. They did not interfere in politics. They did not work with any party against the other. Even there was some accusation by unofficial, of course, unofficial accusations by some Saudis that Oman was helping the Houthis. These were in some of the newspapers. One of what's called, I think, Al Watani newspaper in Saudi Arabia, which is an official newspaper, saying that the Omanis were helping the Houthis in terms of smuggling weapons. Of course, Omanis have completely denied this, and this is unjustified. This is um, false accusation, completely false accusation. Oman has as well, like the boundaries with Yemen. Oman is sharing the Strait of Hormuz with Iran, like Oman on one side and Iran on the other side. So Oman is in the middle. It's locked in the middle between Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Iran. So they cannot fight with anybody. They cannot join any of those countries. They want to have the independence and they would like to be always neutral in such conflict and in other conflicts. In the last slide, you could see that Oman has the elements to end the war in Yemen. Yes, Oman has the element. Oman has one of the best elements to end the war in Yemen. How are they going to end the war in Yemen? How are they going to make this end? This could be done through cooperation with the United Nations and the United States, because Omanis per se would not be able to make any decision. They're not party in this conflict. Omanis can be mediator in this conflict with the help of the United States and United Nations, because Oman is one of the best allies, I mean, not allies, one of the best friends with every party to this conflict. Oman has hosted almost everybody. So the United Nations and the United States can rely heavily on Muscat to stop Yemeni bloodshed. And this could be the situation. But one concern that will the Saudis and UAE allow Omanis to do so? We have lots of doubt. One of the things is that the Saudis and UAE do not have a strong relationship with Oman. There was some kind of implicit accusations and some kind of attempts a few times to have an influence by the Emiratis in Omani politicians. We last a few years, there were some spying cells were caught in Oman. They were spying for United Arab Emirates. So the relationship looks really good, but we have hidden agenda and we have difficult really relationship which is somehow covered by diplomacy. Diplomacy has been always there. All these countries still working together. They look as friends, colleagues, member of the same regional organization, the GCC, but at the same time, lots of hidden agenda. And we do have some of tensions from time to time, even at the social level, between the people of United Arab Emirates and Oman. This is hidden, but we could see this, we can sense it from time to time, and this would affect the role of Oman to take a decision to be able to work as a mediator in this conflict of Yemen. But it's still there. United States could be the one can work with Oman if Joe Biden would like to make such a decision with the help of the United Nations as well. And Oman, this could be the situation. I would like to thank you, and then we can open the floor for discussion now.
Hello, Professor. May I ask a question?
Can I just turn this?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
What's your name?
I'm Safet. I'm from Turkey.
Okay,
First
hold
of
on a
all,
second. Just hold on.
okay.
Just a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
First of all, Professor, thank you so much for your great talk and presentation. And I would like to ask especially about the relationship between Turkey and the Yemen. But after asking my two questions, later I'm going to ask my follow-up question. And my first two questions are that: what is the standing of Turkey towards the Yemeni civil war? And before the civil war, how was the relationship between Yemen and Turkey? And now, how is it? And is there any differences in the relationship between Turkey and Yemen before and during the civil war?
Turkey trying always to keep a good relationship with the Yemeni as an official government. With this conflict, not only Turkey, many other countries in the region and in the world are not able to keep the same base of relationship with the Yemenis because of the conflict. But I think what we still have, what we can understand, the fact that Turkey is one of the countries who recognize the legitimate government of Yemen. Even with the whole conflict, and even Turkey believe in peace negotiations, this could be the end of this conflict. The end of the conflict will be only through negotiations and through peace talks. Turkey would believe that establishing good ties with Yemen that can help the relationship between the two communities, as Yemen, one of the oldest countries, where we have, I'm not talking about the similarity of the faith, because yes, even though we have similarities, because Yemeni mostly Sunni and Turkey is almost everybody Sunni Muslim. This could be one of the things, but when you talk about Turkey trying to support the people everywhere in the Muslim world and in the Arab world, and this would necessitate to keep ties with everybody. So this is not going to be at the expense of any party of the Yemen. The Turkish officials and the government will not support one party at the expense of the other in this conflict. We do have now, the ties is not the same like before. Now everybody is working like an emergency situation. The conflict goes on, and we have the minimal ability to work and cooperate. I'm not the expert in talking about the Yemeni Turkish, but again, like this is the situation, at least for now, that Turkey was and is still supporting peace negotiations between the parties and having an end to this conflict.
Okay, and you have already...
I'm not sure if I answered.
Yes, you have already answered my follow-up question, and my follow-up question was, is there any de facto roles of Turkey in appeasing the related civil war? That was my follow-up question, but you have already answered. Thank you so much.
I believe so. No, but then this, I would like to add to this, Safed, this, I believe that Turkey can play a major role in this in terms of talking to Iranians. I know the tension between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and this kind of tension will not allow Turkey to be able to talk to the Saudis or to the Emiratis, because there's some tension for the past few years. But then maybe if the Omanis would like to include Turkey to talk with the Iranians, but this is going to be having a little chance. I don't think that's going to be a possible situation. Maybe United States would depend much on Omanis and the Kuwaitis more than anybody else, and not Turkey, because if you would like to have a mediator, he or she or whatever country would have to have strong tie with both parties to the conflict.
Yes, yes, you're right. Thank you so much, Professor.
You're welcome.
Sir, I'm from India. My question is recent signing of the Riyadh Agreement. So, can we see the Riyadh Agreement as a strategic loss for the Iranians, as we see that the Southern Transition Council have negotiated with the legitimate government? So, can we see it as a loss for the Iranian strategic interest?
Not really, because the Iranians have the influence and the Houthis is still there. And we don't have an end, even though with this attempt with the Riyadh agreement, this is not making any kind of real change on the ground. The situation is still as it is, almost. But the Saudis want to end the conflict from their side, but this is going to cost them a lot. Like, how are they going to end? Are they going to pull it from the country? Now, how are they going to do this with the existence of some militias, like talking about tens of thousands of armed soldiers who are going to be still there? If you would like to pull out and into conflict, you have to deal with militias. You have to have only one legitimate government who can rule the country without any kind of existence to any militants. Any militants who stay there, like tens of thousands of them, can jeopardize the stability of the country. Any attempt now have to take into consideration an end to the existence of many militants who work in parallel with the legitimate government. Maybe some of those militants could be joining the military, working side by side, if there was an agreement coming under the auspices of the United Nations and other countries in the world, because this is an issue where not only at the level of the Saudis and Iranians and Yemenis, I think the United Nations have to intervene somehow to end and to deal with the situation, because it's not only the end to the conflict. You talk about the devastation of the country. Yemen is destroyed and devastated. So any term of reconciliation or peace have to take into consideration the ability to restructure the whole military and political situation and to rebuild the country. Otherwise, all these kind of arrangements, they're not going to last, and they're not going to bring an end to this conflict. Okay. Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
You hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I'm Abdurrahman Mahamoudani from Somalia, yeah.
Hello, Abdurrahman, go on.
Yeah. God bless you, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask you some question about the two slides. The one is the Yemen conflict, and the other will be the Omanis role in the role of mediation, the conflict mediation. If I go fast, the first question is, the Yemeni conflict has been in a war for at least 10 years or at least 9 years. And then the last years, the Yemeni leader who was leading the country for at least 3 decades or 30 years, Al Abdullah Saleh was killed by his side, and then Yemen was in a conflict after Ali Abdullah Saleh was killed. Can we say?
Yes.
Okay. Do you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we say Yemen is still in the role of war is existing, or can we say Yemen are divided into two parties, the Sunni and the Shia. The Shia are leading by the Iranian, and the Sunni was supported by UAE and the other side is of Saudi Arabia. That's the first question.
Yes, I think Yemen has been divided between Sunni and Shia. This was not the main cause of the conflict, because when we talk about Sunni and Shia, they used to live side by side, one country, people living, working, having family relationship for many decades, and there was no issue with this. But then when you talk about the conflict, this conflict has been there for the past 9 years, divided the country into Sunni and Shia. But again, this is not the main cause to the conflict. The main cause is the influence of outside parties of the Yemenis. I think if the Yemenis are able to work together, they can reconcile, they can have peace talks, and there is a high possibility that Yemenis can live side by side again and end the conflict. And I mean, Yemen was in the past, we have the north and the south of Yemen, then we have the unity. That was the situation. I think this could be a possibility again, that Yemen would have a unity without the intervention by the Saudis and the Iranians. If we rule out the possibility of intervention by the outside power, then there is a high possibility Yemenis can live side by side. Then what I believe in this situation, what is called sectarian cause to the conflict, sectarianism, is not the main cause to the conflict, even though it has been used, it has been mobilized by some, by most, but this is not the main cause. All right?
Yeah. The second question will be, as we know, the Turkish foreign minister and the Saudi foreign minister was met in, as I think, in Riyadh last days. That means the Turkish and the. Do you hear me, sir?
Yes, go on.
Yeah. The foreign minister of Turkey and the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia was met in the last days in Riyadh, and they are talking about the conflict in Yemen. The conflict in Yemen. Can we say the UAE and Saudi Arabia are divided because of the conflict in Yemen? Because of Turkey, Saudi are nearly talking about the conflict, and the other side will be needed to divide the country. As we know, when the Saudi Arabia became ally with the UAE was captured by the island of Socotra, and they are divided. Can we say both UAE and Saudi Arabia are divided for the situation of Yemen?
We could see that. We could see that differences between,
because of their interest.
Yeah, we can see now that some differences between the Saudis and United Arab Emirates in Yemen. Even though what I mentioned in last year, that the Emiratis have left mostly from Yemen, but they still have the influence. They still have that some troops. They still have the logistics, and they would like to stay there because Yemen for them is strategic location. Saudi is the same thing, but the Saudis have lost a lot, and they would like to have an end to this conflict. They want to have an end to this conflict, but then this is not coming at an easy price. To end this conflict, you have to pay. What I mean by this, the Saudis will pay. They have to concede. Same thing for the Houthis and the Iranians. They have to concede. Any kind of solution to this conflict in Yemen have to be based on compromise, the giving and take and give. You cannot take everything you want. You cannot leave everything. That would be the situation. I think the Saudis might leave some of the influence. They could be one of the possibilities, having power sharing or division, but nobody's going for division. No one would like to divide the country, because Yemen should be, and it's going to be, one country, should not be divided. So there could be possibility of sharing. What I mean by sharing power, we talk about minorities and majorities. If we come to the term that everybody have to take part in this government, which is going to be in the future, that's why not, if there is a chance that everybody could be included in the talks, So the Saudis, if they would like to have peace and end this conflict, they should somehow give up and should not demand their own coalition partner to have a full control of the country. Same thing for the Houthis. If they want to have share and power, they should give up on their own control on the capital city and other places and talk. Talk can make things easy. All right, anybody else?
Thank you, Professor. We have also another questions from the Q&A part. One of is that asked by Safi Mazlan, and he asked that the Oman, under the new ruler, is it still capable play a vital role as mediator in the region? What do you think about it?
Yes, I think Oman has the same relationship with everybody and keeping the same distance. And the new Sultan of Oman, Sultan Haytham, believe in the same mechanism, the same policy of Sultan Qaboos. The new Sultan made his first speech and he pledged to carry on in the same path and the same policy of Sultan Qaboos. I think Oman is still doing the same thing. It's not under the influence of anybody. Believe me that the Saudis wanted to influence Oman. They wanted to have influence. The same thing with Emiratis. They want to have influence on Omani, but they could not do so. Omanis are firm in terms of their own position. They want to keep the same distance with everybody in the region, and they're still working with everybody to keep the possibility of having peace there.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Riham Amir. I'm doing my PhD in Istanbul. As we all know, the trending issue now is the numerales relations with Israel. So I just want to ask, do you believe that Oman will be the next Arab country to normalize relations with Israel? And as is well known that the countries have or established an official relations before, and the Israeli Prime Minister before 2 years, Netanyahu, have visited or lead even a delegation to Oman and met the Sultan Qaboos. So I just want to know your opinion in this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reham. Where are you from? Which country?
I'm Palestinian, but I live in Jordan. No. Okay. I'm Jordanian, but Palestinian.
Okay, Reham. I believe so. That's even though the indications we have in Oman showing that it's not going to happen soon. But at the same time, we have, you know what it's called, mixed signals. That is the situation exactly in Oman. Mixed signals. We have some good ties between the Omanis and the Israelis. Very good ties. A few days ago, we heard there's some kind of a friendship association between Omanis and Israelis. Most people in Oman, most of them say no to normalization. We had hashtag of tens of thousands, or maybe hundreds of thousands of Omanis says no normalization. They don't like it. They don't want it. They believe this would influence badly the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian situation. The Omanis somehow, even though they have the distance and they don't follow the news much, but when it comes to Palestine, they feel for Palestine and for the Palestinians.
It's the same with Bahrainis. So
almost not.
The people,
yes,
is something else. I'm talking about the government.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm going to say. See, we'll say mixed signals. That is why even the Mufti, the highest religious echelon in the country, Al-Khalili, Ahmed Al-Khalili, what he mentioned, he's against normalization. He comes in a position, the second rank after the Sultan. People love him, they respect him much, and he said, no, we're not going to make it. Normalization is against our beliefs. But at the same time, the signals we have from the government showing strongly there could be a chance coming soon, sooner or later, that Oman could be the next country having normalization with Israel. That I can see that well. I had some discussion with some officials, with some people I know well in Oman who believe that what we have from the Mufti does not really have any influence on politicians, and he's not talking on behalf of the official government. The Sultan does not talk much about the situation. Even the new minister, we have the new minister of foreign affairs, he does not talk much. Omanis do not talk to media much. If you invite them to talk to the media, they don't like to appear on TV. So they don't talk much, but when they talk, they make sense. I could see sometimes they make us confused, but I can tell you, most likely, Oman will normalize sooner than later.
Well,
It
will be a new disappointment.
That's gonna come most likely. To me, this is gonna be not only to me, but this is to most people who live in Oman. This could be disappointing. There's going to be a really bad thing to be happening for Omani people. But the same as you mentioned, Reham, this what happened for the people of Bahrain. Many of them are against the normalization, but they could not do much about it because the elites, the politicians have made it. I cannot say that Omanis are going to make it, but I'm saying the indications, most likely normalization is coming. We have seen this. I have some rumors, some information from some people, diplomats, who believe strongly it's gonna come soon. When, we don't know yet.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Unfortunately. You're welcome. Anybody, anyone? All right, shall we take another 5 minutes, then we can end it.
Yes, Professor. Actually, I have a question in terms of Yemen. As the latest development which happened in last week, the legitimate government Prime Minister Abdul Malik declared that they have reached an agreement with the Southern Transitional Council to establish a government which consists 24 ministers, if I don't mistake, and 12 of them belongs to Southern Transitional Council. So, and also we have known that this establishment of government is a part of Riyadh Agreement, which is signed between the legitimate Hadi government and the Southern Transitional Council in 2019. But as you mentioned, the Riyadh Agreement is one of the failed attempts to reach a reconciliation to resolve the Yemen conflict. So what do you think about the latest developments in Yemen?
Whatever happens, whatever these developments, they come from mostly one side. If they're not going to include the Houthis, it's not going to work out. It's a good attempt in the way of having peace for the long term, but they have to take into consideration the Houthis and their demands. I'm not saying this is the must, but this is the de facto situation. When we talk about realism, when you look at the situation, we have to be realistic. Yemen is divided and is still divided, and any talks in Yemen have to include almost every faction who represent majority or minority of the Yemeni community, of the Yemeni people. This happens a few times in the past, even in Libya. Eventually, if you would like to talk and have an end to this conflict, you have to include everybody. But if this step have been taken now in order to build up for more talks with everybody else and to widen the negotiations and the talk between all partners and all parties and all positions, that can make really sense. Yes, can make sense. But for now, this situation still as it is. We have the tension, we have the conflict that goes on, the same humanitarian situation. We don't have now to witness more political move. We believe in accumulation, build up and up, building more accumulation that can make it that we can see more happening soon. And I think this kind of a step made by the legitimate government, that could be a necessity for now, as we are few weeks before Joe Biden takes office in the United States. And this is my belief. And if the legitimate government is organized, well maintained, and they can talk on behalf of most people in Yemen, this can lead to United States come to this situation and talk to everybody and include everybody in the talks. We know Joe Biden believes in end of this conflict, and we have seen some of his statements. And I guess what's happening now, it's kind of steps towards ending the conflict if the United States and other parties in the region come to support it.
Yes, thank you, Professor. Besides, if you look at from the Emirati perspective, can we say that the United Arab Emirates won the legitimate ground in Yemen? Because you already mentioned that the UAE has also some interest in Yemen, especially in Aden, El Hudaydah, and Socotra. So with this agreement, the UAE is able to win the legitimate ground on Yemen?
No, it's not about the UAE or Saudi Arabia. It's about their own partner. When you talk about this council and the legitimate power, its legitimacy comes from the people of Yemen, but nobody can impose legitimacy. But the United Arab Emirates have been working in Yemen and many other countries in the Middle East. They would like to have kind of influence. And this is the ambition of their own leaders, to have the kind of control and influence of many countries in the Middle East. And I believe that this role of UAE is not separate from the role of Saudi Arabia and other new partners. Now, we have a camp. I'm not going to take side. I'm saying I have to be really careful with my words. You know, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and now we have, with the normalization, we have Israel. They are creating a camp. It's a new political camp in the Middle East, right? So they would like to include everybody who can be in their own side. So United Arab Emirates is leading. They have the influence, they have the support, and they have the mandate from the United States and from Israeli side. So that does not give them any kind of legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from the people, but they will try to have a foothold. They will try to have any kind of influence in Yemen, as Yemen is very important for them, especially what I mentioned in my presentation. We had some kind of speculation that the Israelis and Emiratis, they would like to establish spying, not camp, even installation in Yemen, in Socotra. And they would like to have the influence on Al Hudaydah. They would like to oversee the Red Sea and Bab al-Mandeb, because location is important. Location is important. So that at that time, if United Arab Emirates can oversee two sides, can oversee the Gulf and the Red Sea, and it can oversee Bab al-Mandeb and Hormuz at the same time, if that's going to be possible for them, they're doing their best. And they would like to even, I'm speculating, I think maybe in the future that United Arab Emirates would have an influence to take over Musandam. Musandam is an Omani city, and it's located on the edge of Strait of Hormuz. And this is really complicated and difficult, because it's isolated. Omanis who would like to go to Musandam, they have to go through United Arab Emirates. You see, it's the only dot, it's the only small city. But this is oversea Strait of Hormuz. but then it's somehow located. You can see that it's like in United Arab Emirates. So UAE would like to have a strategic location to have their own influence and impact on everybody else in the whole region, not on their own. They have their own partners that I mentioned: Saudis, Egyptians, Bahrain, Israel. This is a new camp. It is a new camp. It has been established in the Middle East. They would like to widen, not giving any chance to anybody else who could be opposing them. Whether it could be Turkey, it could be Iran, or anyone else who's opposing their own policy, even at the individual level or political parties, they should not be there. They are willing to fight anyone else who are against their own will. This could be the situation. This is why they're trying their best, especially UAE having the influence, even that there was some kind of assessment on the influence of Mohammed bin Zayed on Mohammed bin Salman, UAE on Saudi Arabia, the kind of influence. We talk about the kind of the political influence, the control of the personality itself. We talk about the political psychology, how somebody becomes able to influence others in the whole region based on what? What United Arab Emirates have, what kind of capability? Not much really, comparing to Saudi Arabia or to Egypt and other countries, but they have the mandate or the power comes from most likely United States and Israel. Shimdi, or do you have any last question?
I guess no. Thank you for your explanation as well. And I think that we have come to an end of our time for this week. So do you have any last words for this week?
I would like to thank you again. Like I'm away. I'm not in Muscat this week and next week. I'm traveling, but next week as well we're gonna make it maybe from a different location. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna be in Doha.
Okay.
In Qatar.
Thank you, Professor.
Right. Next week we'll be talking about, I think, political participation in I think in Oman, in the Gulf in general, about political participation. So that will be last week. I think next week will be the last week for these 8 weeks.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dear participants, that's all for today. As our professor mentioned, next week is our last week. So see you in last week. Have a nice day.